Schwee the People, Episode 3. I'm Sean. We got Louie here. We got Shannon here. Maybe later we'll have Mike here for some stuff. I'm recording these separately.
Are you talking about like when we'd skip school and shit?
Well, I don't know. Did you and I ever skip together?
Not together, but we would bump into each other.
While skipping?
Yeah, yes. Yeah, we would both skip school and then like we would like bump into each other in downtown Mount Clemens.
Like by the end of my sophomore year, I was like, no, it was
we would be like
really my junior year. I was like gone. I was like,
yeah, we would like accidentally meet each other at the Brown Bag Deli.
They're like, oh, you're allowed in here too? You don't cause trouble? Yeah.
Oh, that place was owned by Jerry the Pollock.
All I know is the woman that worked there, like, if kids were getting rowdy, she'd boot them out, but, like, could always stay.
That was probably Jerry's wife.
Probably.
But he used to run a Detroit bar.
Okay.
And so it's funny that he opens up this place in, like, downtown Mount Clemens, at Brown Bag Deli, but he had that look of, like, someone who carries a baseball bat behind the... I remember I went up to him, I was getting a coffee, and I went, do you have any... I was, like, 15 or 16. I go, do you got any of the flavored creams? And he goes, flavored creams are for queers.
Nice.
So...
AI?
What was your topic?
So the song being generated by AI and all the raw materials, it's amazing to me what this intelligence can do and how it can be used. Right now, Carter, he's having his ChatGPT go through all of our conversations that he's like recorded and uploaded.
Yeah,
and we're going to use it as like a search
podcast.
Yeah, it was too late, but
how do you know that was even him responding?
I don't.
It could have been the AI
because it's AI.
Yeah.
But he's setting it up so that it has like, and it can only work in that session for the AI.
Basically, he's so lazy that he doesn't even want to have conversations with people anymore.
That's
so he's
not
just
what.
like,
Listen
he's just
to me.
having AI learn all of his speech patterns and mannerisms. So
although
they
he
can
probably
just talk
could
for
do
him.
that, but basically we're going to have a search engine of
Just
anything
say
and a
something
summary of
sexist and
anything
then
we've
be
had
smug.
a conversation about.
Sean, your sister is talking.
Sorry.
It's fine. Louis like, she's finally opening her fucking mouth.
I'm so sorry.
Stop talking
I'm
over
so
her.
sorry.
That's it.
Well, here's my thing with AI. Well, first of all, it's not really AI. Like, artificial intelligence would be like, practically be like sentience to some extent. Like, the problem with like AI is, well, they're still trying to figure out how to, use AI for shit. Like, a lot of people are questioning whether or not some of these scripts, because they're so generic, are being half written by like AI. And when it wasn't AI, before AI, people were saying the algorithm, simply meaning that the script writer still existed, but every stroke of his pen was fucking based on marketing and what the algorithm says, is directing the story. But then you have like the AI art and stuff, and the funny thing, which is terrible, but the funny thing is that the people who seem to respond most to AI art, who are like, what, like, and they will arrogantly say, what the fuck do we, because they always hated the artists for being like, left wing or liberal,
right? And
they tend to always be, the majority of them. And they would say, they were bragging, look at this, what do we need you artists, you liberal artists for, and this and that. And it was just kind of funny because it's like the people who are praising AI art, something that your uncultured regular person could look at and go, that doesn't look right. But it's fascists who love AI art the most. Like, they can't, like, if you ever look at Hitler's paintings, people always go, did you know Hitler painted? Hitler was a good painter. He was terrible.
I won't look at any of his
art.
art.
He was terrible. He didn't understand...
humans?
Well,
yeah. No, what do they call it? Perspective. So if you're looking, you look down a hallway, it kind of has that perspective where it's narrowing. His would be straight.
So it's all two-dimensional.
Yeah. Like, it was like the windows would not get smaller; they would stay the same size.
No.
As it, like
that's very terrible sounding.
Yeah, and that's a severe lack of artistic. He might have understood some of the strokes of the the paintbrush and everything, maybe some of the techniques. But the imagination and the ability to actually create,
understand any form.
He was more
or
less like an alien mimicking, and then not quite understanding, like
Right. It'd be like basically if I went to go paint a painting, like from the ground up, like I understand some dimension, but when it does come come to perspective and stuff, I do have a hard time. And I notice a noticeable lack of translation from the image in my head to whatever I'm trying to put down on paper. And it comes like that with drawing and everything. Because you'd really think that if you could see a clear image in your mind, there should be no reason why you can't translate it onto a piece of paper.
Yeah,
but there's such a block.
Yes. That's why, like, I never had the patience to actually be able to fucking draw anything or something. Like, especially when I was younger, because it's just so difficult to translate that image to paper.
Even though you can see it right there in your mind's eye. Yeah. And then just even staring at something, it's easier if I'm looking at it physically while it's processing to get it on paper, but it's still, there's something lost in the translation.
Well, you know what it is? If it's not tracing, but you're looking at a picture, let's say a simple picture, like a cartoon drawing of Homer Simpson, and you're looking at the picture and then you're trying to copy it, it's because you're going eyeball, nose, no. It's kind of like that's how Hitler painted.
Right.
He wasn't actually thinking of a picture and trying to bring it to life. He was just like, this is how windows are made, right? Like, this is how he was just imitating what he had seen or been told is the way to do it.
Well, yeah.
And so you have a complete lack of, like, the actual ingenuity and everything else.
Almost like a child, like a small child drawing something.
And at the time he wanted to be an artist, he was basically a poser. You know, Berlin was much like, the artistic scene in Berlin was no different than, like, the artistic scene in Paris around the same time. Or if you've ever been to an open mic, he's the jerk-off that shows up to read poetry. But, you know, you have those people who, they want to be like all the deep poets and the singer-songwriters and everything. And not like they're that great either, hanging out there, but whatever. They, at least, you can tell, are like being original. But then you have the people who want to copy that. And then they're taking advantage of the scene or the situation there where everyone has to clap to be cordial and nice. And they're not going to get the real critique or feedback that they would need to kind of tell them, you need to do better. And then it becomes a high for them. They like to, they're mediocre, but they live just to, like, get those phony, like, claps or...
so they're, like, riding the coattails of the trend.
Yeah.
Like, so you got your trendsetters or, like, subject speakers or, like, style authors.
They're in love with the idea of being an artist.
Right.
Not art. Like, that's, you know...
And then, like, everything is just like a quest.
So it's like this guy...
how authentic it is. There's a clear difference between, like, just trying to use AI to create art, which just comes out bizarre and wrong every time.
So Jurassic Park looked good for decades.
Now. Yeah.
And the reason why is because that Tyrannosaurus head is real.
Right.
And, like, a lot of the animatronics and everything were real. And where it would suffer was when they would have to use full CGI for everything. Yeah. But they would still use CGI mixed with the animatronics to cover up certain things. And that's when it looks best. And that's kind of what CGI was meant for. Then sort of capitalist drive in Hollywood was like, well, what do we need puppetry anymore and animatronics? And so then they tried to make everything CGI, even to the point where that's where the Star Wars prequels suffered, is because they were acting within an entirely green screened environment, sometimes not even with another actor.
That, and it got poor. Like, it used to be like you could watch a movie in the big screen and you couldn't tell the CGI really until it got into the television. Yeah. And then you could really see how it was like an overlay and kind of like really crappy looking.
I'm still impressed by map paintings. Like, that takes like a lot of fucking work. Like, that's real art to me.
Right.
Like we watched Escape from LA and then we watched Escape from New York. And the thing I noticed in Escape from LA was like a super over-reliance on CG at a time when it wasn't there yet.
Yeah.
Like, you can use it effectively if you knew how to use it correctly.
Yeah.
But they were overusing it on everything, and it just kind of...
Like, every fire is just, outlined in white.
It was, like, basically...
it looks like a cutout.
They still had to heavily light people at that time. So even though you have... What's his name? Who plays Snake?
Kurt Russell.
Yeah. So... But yeah, when you have Snake surfboarding on a CGI wave, they had to blast light on him in the green screen room, and then they had to make the CGI wave. It stuck out so much because the lighting was all wrong, and they hadn't quite perfected it at that time.
Right.
Matrix was able to get away with it more because they had that greenish filter over everything.
Yeah.
They did.
Well,
and that's fine.
So
that movie's still pretty good, too. Well, my whole point was that it got so bad you can tell in the movie theater.
So
too.
Anyway, back to the matte painting.
Sean,
thing.
your sister is talking.
God damn it. God damn it. So The other thing that I noticed in Escape from L.A. was like there was like a lot of huge matte paintings, and they all looked really bad. Like not
Because
really bad, but like they looked bad. Like you can like obviously tell it was like a matte painting backdrop. And then we just watched Escape from New York, and they were basically the same quality of matte paintings, but because you have like kind of like almost like a decade's difference between the two movies, because the film quality is different.
Yeah,
in Escape from New York,
and the lighting,
the matte paintings look better.
You know what they
in
look
Escape from New York because of the quality of the film.
Best looking
They
matte
look
paintings.
more realistic.
Yeah, the best looking matte paintings though ever that were done that almost, and it worked because it was on purpose, was the Dick Tracy movie. Because they shot the movie using only primary colors because they wanted to imitate the Sunday comics.
Yes.
And when they would show the matte paintings, it looked real but sort of comic booky, and it blended so well with the world that they created that was actually physical.
Yeah.
Every scene, because it was designed to look like one panel out of every, in a comic strip.
Right.
I watched somebody reviewing it recently, and they made a point like you can take almost every scene in that movie and hang it on a wall because of how like good it looked. Did you hear about how he still has the rights to it, but because he never got around to making a sequel, because Disney wouldn't back him for a sequel anymore, even though the movie was successful. So he had to do something in order to maintain the rights. So he dressed up like Dick Tracy and did interviews on Turner Classic Movies.
I missed that, and I'm glad I did.
Oh, no, he sent them to me at one point. It's kind of bizarre.
It sounds very bizarre.
One of my favorite Dick Tracy, because I was big into Dick Tracy before that movie came out. Like I was into Dick Tracy when I was like 8.
You were big into Dick?
Yeah.
Tracy?
A lot of people don't realize, like, because you have the Rogues Gallery and the Tracy villains who are all weird freaks, inbred looking, and you had the Brow. In the beginning of the Dick Tracy movie, they made the Brow in the very beginning. He gets killed with a couple other characters, like as if they're a gang. The Brow was a Nazi spy. And the comic strip that came out during World War II. And he's like running codes off the docks and secretly telling the Nazis what's going on at the docks and all this shit. And it's like one of the better Dick Tracy comics. And it extends for, like, it's a long comic because it extends over several newspapers or whatever. And Warren Beatty wanted to do, like, Dick Tracy Goes to War. And it was going to be the Brow story and take place during World War II. And they would have been so awesome. It never happened, so...
Sean, do you still have the Dick Tracy books?
I was just about to ask about that. Like, did we find that when we went through through the library? Because it might still be in the garage somewhere.
It might be in the garage.
Really?
Yeah.
I bought a book.
They were big books like this. Comics,
I bought one that was, they actually reissued them based on the year. And I think the one I have, it was the introduction of the Blank, who was a guy who was escaped prison and got his face blown off by a shotgun, so he'd wear a cheesecloth over his face.
Oh my God.
But like everyone was freaked out by him because they would call him the Blank because he had no face.
Right.
I think the one I have is 1935 to 1936, but to buy each individual one, the one I got is a hardcover.
Yes.
And it's like $60 for one.
That's what we had growing up. Like, well, we didn't have, but my dad collected. And so, like, you have my handwriting on the side of the book because I'm, like, a little kid. But that's the first comic I ever looked at was Dick Tracy.
Yeah.
Because I was, like, what, 3 or 4.
My favorite Dick Tracy villain was Flat Top.
Yeah.
Just because we had the action figures, and I would always stand the Flat Top action figure on his head.
Well, he was one of the most loved villains, though. Like, one of the most favorite ones. Then he had a sister.
He was nicer.
He had a sister called Angel Top. That after he finally got killed, and Big Boy Caprice, the original story is that Tess Trueheart, that's Dick Tracy's love, the reason he became a cop is because Tess Trueheart's dad got muscled and killed by Big Boy Caprice. Chester Gould, who created the comic, lived in Chicago at the time, and so Big Boy was kind of based on Al Capone. But
he was played by Al Pacino in the movie.
Right. The way Big Boy Caprice dies, and the comic came out in the 70s, was he finds out he's dying from cancer, and he puts $1 million contract on Dick Tracy's life, and it's just a series of people trying to whack Tracy, and him besting them, and they finally get the evidence to bust Big Boy, and he gets so mad the cops showed up at his house, and he dies from a heart attack. And
What?
And Tracy just
That's how you ended a legacy, I guess.
Yeah, but it's kind of like funny. Sam Ketchum, who's Tracy's partner, he's like, how would you like that? And we never got a chance to bust him. And Dick Tracy's just like smirking, going, well, it's the way it is. Even though he's just spent the past month avoiding several fucking attempts on his life and everything. But you would think a lot of people now might think like, oh, Dick Tracy, I don't want to glorify cops and this and that. Dick Tracy wasn't a prick cop. He was like a really cool, relaxed, like he obeyed everyone's rights.
Yeah,
like
I mean, well, I don't know if I would call it like propaganda, which
No.
is like I don't know if you've ever heard the term propaganda before.
No, but I can.
We won't get into that here.
the way propaganda works would be like Dirty Harry.
Okay, we won't get into that.
Well, I
here.
mean, not fully, but Dirty
Right.
Harry was a prime example of when people started recognizing what propaganda might be.
Yeah, it's
and
like
Dirty Harry. I love the movie, but the fact that Dirty Harry throughout the whole thing is like the courts are holding me back.
Right.
That's what made people pissed off and nervous. It
Yeah.
works for the story though.
Right.
But people were recognizing at that time. The second you start having cops say "fuck this system," I should be allowed to do anything I want. That's when you start moving into the propaganda sort of
Right.
territory.
Yeah. With Dick Tracy, it's more like you have the one cop, he's the good cop, and then like everybody else around him is kind of inept.
Yeah, they're
You know?
idiots. Yeah.
You know, it's like almost like a Sherlock Holmes type deal where like the police force is inept, so this other guy has to come in and solve everything for them.
Right.
They had brutal, I don't know if you can call this like progressive for its time, but some of the female, I mean, because at that time, you imagine everyone else was probably depicting a female as like helpless, whereas like the Tracy women villains were like violent and psychopathic and
Very
badass.
manipulative.
One villain named Cruey Lou, she would do this, her thing was that she would pose as a photographer for rich people's babies, and then they would stake the joint out while they're there, and no one would suspect the baby photographer.
Right.
And her thing called Cruey Lou, she had a crew cut on top, and then like regular hair, you know.
Oh,
and,
okay.
So she's responsible for the mullet.
But yeah, it sounds
yeah,
like
yeah.
it.
Basically, she had like a mullet, but like the crew cut was
Worst
also
crime
popular at the
ever.
time. I mean, and that makes sense that Chester Gold would say, "Oh, the crew cut's in. What if a woman had it?" And but she
What
throughout,
if we gave this crew cut to a broad?
but like throughout the comic, she beats the shit out of a mother who just had a kid. She stuffs a gang boss into a hospital sterilizing machine and turns it on
Jesus.
to steam him to death.
Oh my
She
God.
accidentally kidnaps Dick Tracy's baby and beats the shit out of it and abandons it in the woods. like,
An accident.
no, well, she finds out, but she's like, they show the panels of her whacking this fucking baby.
Yeah.
Just beating the shit out of a baby?
Yeah. And then she's like goes, oh, hopefully they find you before the wolves do, and she just wandered like leave because she had to drive
Well,
the
that
car
was
off
nice
the
of
road
her.
into the woods to
That
try
was,
to hide.
That was nice of her though to
Yeah.
say, I hope that they find you before the wolves do.
Yeah.
You know, like if she was truly a monster, she'd be like, I hope the wolves find you first.
The way Tracy kills the Brow is after he arrests him. He's got him up in the top floor of the police station, and he's in handcuffs. And this Gravel Gertie, who was a hillbilly woman that fell in love with the Brow and was helping hide him out, but they have her under arrest for like obviously like aiding and abetting. But she ended up becoming a beloved character and became good later on. But she grabs one of the cop's guns and throws it to the Brow, and he's fumbling for the safety with his hands cuffed. And Tracy, thinking quickly, grabs an inkwell from a desk and beans him in the head with it.
Right.
He flies out the window and gets impaled by the American
Oh
flag.
my God. Wow. Well, that escalated
And he's the
quickly.
Nazi spy, so obviously
Yeah.
it was a great comic.
I think the climate's just right for a sequel.
I think Bruce Campbell should play Dick Tracy.
Oh, that'd
and
be awesome.
Oh, that
and
would
here's
be
the thing
great.
is that like Bruce Campbell might be in his early 60s now, but when you're a Hollywood actor, you can pass for 15 years younger. Dick Tracy was always meant to kind of be played as a 50-year-old. He's like a seasoned, like not in the 30s so much, but from the 1960s on up, Dick Tracy was always kind of like considered like a in his mid 40s to early 50s type of a cop.
Old enough to be done with the BS.
Yeah.
Like, for sure.
Bruce Campbell, of course, has the chin, to go
Yeah,
with
he
it.
does.
So
Yeah.
I could see it.
Although I'd cast Bruce Campbell in literally anything. as
Oh, yeah.
literally anyone.
you see him play Ronald Reagan in the Fargo series.
Yeah, probably.
I think it was like season 2.
There we go.
Yeah, that's
All
gonna,
right, Sean.
that's gonna end.
Oh,
at some
wow. That's
point.
good timing, too.
Yeah.
Oh, according to
Pick your
Louis'
poison.
phone,
Pick your poison.
it's old point-and-click adventure games.
Yeah, I would do old point and click and the point pointing and clicking
Point and clicking.
and adventuring.
Well, it's like.
Well, I want to know where you go with this because, like.
Well, I
We
mean,
could
I don't really
segue with
have
Tex
anywhere.
Murphy.
I don't really have anywhere to go with it.
Sean,
I
talk
just,
about
like,
Tex Murphy. That's
but-
like Dick Tracy meets point and click adventure game.
Yeah, we can talk about it.
Oh, but Police
Tex
Quest
Murphy's-
4 is really Dick Tracy.
Tex Murphy's probably my favorite point and click adventure game.
I know it is.
You know, and it's like I think like not too long ago I saw somebody actually do a retrospective on it because like seemingly nobody talks about Tex Murphy.
Why don't you
anymore.
explain who Tex Murphy is and the world he comes in?
Well,
Where-
okay.
Comes in.
I mean, he would come in that world,
Right.
theoretically,
Yeah,
and realistically,
Theoretically speaking, all characters come at some point,
Right.
like
in their
it's-
world.
Yeah.
Well, I thought.
So
but
let's talk about
it
that
turns
world.
out to be Earth
they
all
all
along.
piss shit and come.
I think he's actually on Mars. I don't remember.
No, he's not.
No,
Okay.
he's in New San Francisco.
Maybe I'm
Like
mixing
it's
up with
a
Total
like an
Recall.
alternate future where like everything's like World War III happened.
Mm-hmm.
Like a bunch of cities were destroyed, and now there's like mutants everywhere. But they're just like there's still people. Like kind of like a film noir, detective story set like a kind of. I wouldn't say post-apocalyptic.
It's
but
not
like
even dystopian. It's just
it is dystopian.
Well,
to a certain
compared to-
extent, but
it's
that's a
more
good-
like a mutated.
like
But
everybody's.
that's a good way to
like
establish
everybody-
his character, though.
so
He
everybody-
chooses to live with the mutants.
Everybody,
like-
well, yeah.
but like buildings are all
everybody-
still standing.
Everybody,
Sean, your sister's.
everybody sleeps during the day and is up at night.
Oh yeah, because the sun is
yeah,
the
because
radiation.
like sun radiation and stuff. Under a Killing Moon is the third game.
Like
Under Killing
no,
Moon
no.
was definitely FMV.
So
with
so
the
yeah,
live actors.
Under a Killing Moon was their third game, and it was the first one that was like full on FMV.
Which stands for full motion video.
Yeah. So like yeah.
I remember when that came out. That's the most popular one that sold.
Well, no. Well, I don't know if it was the most.
Oh,
popular,
no, I looked
but
it up
was
recently.
It was huge.
Yeah.
And
People who
then,
had never heard of Tex Murphy before found out through Under a Killing Moon when that
Yes.
came out in like I want to say 96, 95, 96.
Yeah. I'm not sure. I don't have all the information in front of me.
I'm trying to think of Under a Killing Moon came out in
1994. I just looked it up.
94. Then Point and Click kind of fizzled out, not completely, but it was huge. And then and so was FMV for that brief period.
It
And-
was a very, very brief.
Yeah, like I want to say a window between when they were able to do it
Right.
properly, like from 1992, 93, and then by 96, I want to say 96 and especially 97, it had
Yeah,
run its
97
course.
it was dead.
Yeah.
I could tell you that because 96 is a gray area.
Well, that and PlayStation and all the other home gaming coming out,
PlayStation
who
came
were
out.
using like three-dimensional sprites and things like that, that became the new thing.
Yeah.
So
there
like,
was a big push.
yeah, so people didn't care about live actors anymore and it being able
Right.
to play a live actor in a video game anymore. They wanted to see what else technology can do, how they can make characters and sprites and physics and all that stuff. But the thing that hurts point-and-click adventure gaming now is that a lot of those old games had soft locks where if you didn't pick up a certain item later on in the game, you'd be stuck and you wouldn't even know why. And you and then it would force you to have to look up a hint guide. And then you also had something called Moon Logic, which would be like, how do I stop the Yeti in King's Quest V? Hit him in the face with a custard pie, of course. So
Right.
you
Yeah.
end up
Okay,
just
there was definitely a game we played that had that kind of.
yeah, and so you
BS.
end up just trying everything on everything, which takes away the actual enjoyable thing I always liked about those games, is where you actually have to use your brain and logic to figure out the puzzle.
Yeah.
Even though I'm nostalgic about it and I can look past that stuff, looking back on those games, or even when I replay them, somebody who's 20 years old is going to just hate that. So
Yeah.
it's harder to, get people who are younger back into point and click when the only things that they're going to be able to play are going to have all those flaws in them. It would have to be revamped to a certain degree, done in a way that's going to be more appealing to new gamers and people. Almost going to have to sever some ties. The only nostalgia and the type of gameplay would be simply because that is how a lot of people played certain games back in the 90s.
Right.
But as far that's it. You pretty much are going to have to sever all those ties, do it
Right.
in a way that doesn't rely on moon logic or soft locks.
And now, like, like I play a lot of escape room games,
which are similar.
and they are similar, but
yeah.
they do have one driving force behind them, is that you can't move into another section of the game
Until you complete.
until you finish everything.
Yeah,
And
so
I know it's like a medium level of difficulty for me, and every time it's going to cap at that
Well,
medium level, so it's enjoyable because I'm always progressing.
There was a similar point-and-click adventure game that would do that.
Yeah.
The very same thing, and that was Goblins. Mm-hmm. Which I was actually talking to Louie about, like, not too long ago, where, like, I actually, like, had to look it up.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, yeah, there's this game that we used to play as kids. And,
Yeah,
like,
I know
they
where
had,
you're
like,
going
these
with
three
this.
things, and I couldn't remember the name of it, and it's like, oh, it's literally called Goblins.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like 3 goblins basically have to solve a screen before you can go on to the next one.
But LucasArts was smart enough very early on to not soft lock you. So you could play through Monkey Island 1 and 2, Loom,
Yes.
The Dig,
Yes.
Yes.
Grim Fandango, without ever having to worry about getting soft locked. And a lot of those games too, you couldn't even die in it. Whereas Sierra was notorious for the famous screen that would pop up. What was it? Restore, quit. But you get used to seeing that screen pop up because everything could kill you at some point.
It got like that, and then like it wasn't until Oddworld came out that I was like, oh my god, a game where I'm just not dying and having to restart or reset or have to worry about it, because I would just turn into a murder crows and then reappear. And
I
it's
like
like,
how Monkey Island just like straight up made fun of Sierra.
Yeah, and the rubber tree,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. There's like one point where like you could there's one way you could actually die in that game.
Oh, if you in the beginning.
So yeah, there's like one point because like at the beginning of the game he says like they ask him if he has any talents and he's like, oh, I can hold my breath for 10 minutes. So there's one point in the game where like he gets dumped in the water.
Yeah, but all you have to do is click on a sword in a skeleton's hand.
Yeah, you literally like click on 2 things and you're out. But you have to actually be trying to do this to find this out. If you just leave him there for a solid 10 minutes, he'll eventually drown. And then like all the icons change from like look, touch, whatever, all the interact ones just turn into like float, bloat.
Yeah, and you're like a ghost.
Yeah. Well, no, you're not even a ghost. You're a corpse.
Oh, okay. I thought his ghost appeared at some point too, though.
Maybe, I don't know.
It's been so long. Yeah.
But like they made fun of Sierra because like towards the end of the game, there's like one point where you can fall off a cliff. Mm-hmm. So like he'll fall off and like scream and fall to his death.
The Sierra scream will pop up. Restore, close.
Yeah, the Sierra death fucking tab would come up with like all the options, but like they wouldn't do anything if you clicked on them.
Well, if you clicked on them, he bounced back up.
Yeah, he bounced back up, and he would just go, "Huh, rubber tree plant."
Yeah.
But back to Tex Murphy. Remember we were talking about Tex Murphy?
We should talk about Phantasmagoria.
Yeah, in a second. So
that got rid of soft locks too.
In a second. So
that game was great. All of them.
Shannon's talking. So Overseer, which ended on a cliffhanger, as we remember, came out in 1998.
Okay, it was definitely like the very end of FMV.
So at that point, I believe Access Software, which was the company that made these games, was bought by Microsoft. So like they made the Tex Murphy games. They made they used to make a lot of point-and-click adventure games. They also made the Lynx series. Mm-hmm. If you remember the golf game.
Yep, those were great.
And then Microsoft bought them out primarily because they wanted Lynx. Mm-hmm. So like basically everything else was like fuck it. So
hasn't been golf nearly as good as Lynx. So like
the guy who wrote the FMV games, the FMV Tex Murphy games, mm-hmm. Because like there was like a kind of a cult following and people who wanted that game that was at this point never going to get made. Mm-hmm. He had to figure out some way to kind of resolve it. So like he wrote a couple of books. They actually did a like a radio play where they got the actors back mm-hmm. together to kind of like come up with they came up with like a radio play to kind of like resolve the story to a certain extent.
They had like an ongoing active web page, right?
Yes. Yeah, they had an ongoing active web page, and that was actually kind of depressing because you had they had like a message board, and like there was just like occasionally people popping in. Just like,
when you see it slow down.
Yeah, any news yet? No. So then out of nowhere, so like the two guys, the guy who wrote it and the guy who the lead programmer who was actually the guy who played Tex Murphy.
Okay, nice.
They got together and then eventually started a new company called Big Finish Games, and they started making like.
Was he coming in his world?
They what? What the fuck? They started making like hidden object games, and then they started a Kickstarter to finally make another Tex Murphy game, which was the Tesla Effect, which came out in. What was it? 2014?
I remember you worried about, there was a period of time you were talking to me about how they had done the Kickstarter, and then you were like, I still haven't heard anything. It's been like 2 years.
Yeah. It was like 2 years in development, and it's like...
It was all a lie.
Yeah, and I still haven't
They took our money, yeah.
I still haven't even gotten through the game. Like, I still haven't gotten around to finishing the game. It came out in 2014. So, like, you had a stretch of 1998 and 2014 before this cliffhanger gets resolved.
Yeah.
And you still haven't finished it.
I still haven't finished it.
Now my favorite point and click adventure game is a game called Harvester, but we won't go into detail with that because we can talk for hours about that. But they have a fan club and everything.
Well, you're a model for their fan club,
right? I modeled their T-shirts for them.
Yeah.
But there's still an active fan base around that game. But they had actually complained in 1996 that FMV was already starting to lose interest, and they were doing a more. They didn't even do full. They had FMV in it, but the characters were digitized sprites, like the actors. They would take multiple little short videos of them shuffling, and that's how your character would stand, like while you're waiting to do something. And that game, as far as I know, maybe only had 1 or 2 soft locks, but the puzzles were so easy that you would have to go out of your way to find out how to soft lock yourself in them. And that could also be put up more for rush production. But people had definitely been complaining about the soft lock system that was rampant in the very late 80s, like King's Quest 1, stuff like that. But now they've kind of had a comeback of not FMV but point and click.
There's like even probably around the time I was playing Tesla Effect, I was like looking for like new point and click adventure games, and there's actually like a website that's just like dedicated to kind of bringing the genre back, where it's kind of a hub for like programmers and people interested in making point-and-click adventure games, kind of coming together and sharing resources and stuff. Like people can go on there and like advertise their voice acting and stuff like that, where people are to help people specifically make point-and-click adventure games. And there's been some pretty decent ones that came out of that, which kind of like reminds you of like the old school ones where it was like sprite walking across the screen.
Yeah, the artwork, what you would call pixel art almost today.
Yeah. But you wanted to talk about Phantasmagoria, Shannon?
Yeah, I missed that game.
Oh, boy. You're like kind of like looking at me with like fire in your eyes.
That is I just saw it. Got a message.
Yes, the Roberta Williams magnum opus.
Right.
Roberta Williams is Phantasmagoria.
Right. Yeah, a lot of people brought up that Roberta Williams, while she did write a lot of the King's Quest games and things like that, a lot of people, they say, well, her storylines and everything were whatever, cute for the time,
right.
Especially since it was kind of like the beginning of that genre and everything. As far as like a writer goes, like she was like, a lot of people said upon reflection, the woman who, there was another coder, or I don't even know if she was a coder, but she wound up working with Roberta Williams on one game, and people noticed it was way better. And then she was the one who wrote Gabriel Knight. Her name was Jane Jensen.
Okay.
And people obviously like love Gabriel Knight, that series. Like Gabriel Knight 2.
Just tell me anything, anything at all.
Yeah. That was voiced by Tim Curry, right?
Yeah. What was the first?
Mark
name?
Hamill was in that too.
Yeah, what was the name of it? It was. I know it was the
Sins of the Father was 2, right?
Yeah, I think that was.
No.
wait.
Sins of the Father was 1. Beast Within was number 2.
Yeah. Beast
And
Within.
to show you an example of what they were doing with gaming, Gabriel Knight starts off as your typical point-and-click adventure with the sprite work and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Gabriel Knight 2, FMV. Gabriel Knight 3, polygons. Because
I've never played the third one.
Yeah, I heard it's good too, but it's just that was at the tail end of point and click. But you can kind of see how people just fell out of favor with FMV,
Right.
and were more infatuated with the sort of polygon, like Raccoon City there, fucking
Raccoon
Right,
City
right.
there.
yeah,
Right. No.
Them there Resident Evils and
yeah,
whatnot.
yeah.
I don't know. It's
But,
so strange because I really appreciated the realism.
Well,
Like
the
they
same
got to
thing-
realism faster with the
The same thing happened with
Video.
Mortal Kombat. Mortal Kombat was a fighting
Yeah.
game with digitized sprites,
yeah.
and people saw Tekken and went, "Fuck Mortal Kombat." The three-dimensional
I didn't.
polygon.
I
Well,
thought it was
I know,
BS,
yeah.
but
But that's just
yeah.
how the artwork of gaming, like, it just left that
Yeah,
whole
but I mean,
concept.
like, also after they made Mortal Kombat, there was like a bunch of other companies that made like
So
kind
many.
of like failed clones of Mortal
Yeah.
Kombat, where it's like, well, we'll make our own Mortal Kombat that plays shittier, but the ladies have bigger tits.
Yeah.
But
So-
I think there was more fluidity in the whole straight animation.
Well, when you're a kid, like
Yeah.
when Mortal Kombat first came out, to see
Oh, it was awesome.
real people,
Yes.
like even though it was just a 3-second clip playing
Right.
back and forth, like when they were kind of dunking and
Yep.
bobbing or whatever.
Yeah, it's like, this is gonna be awesome. I'm gonna beat the shit out of that nerd with the backwards ball cap.
But yeah, that was like, to me, that was like, this is the future of gaming.
Yeah.
Real people.
Right.
Whether
It's
they're
supposed to be real
digitized
realistic,
sprites
yeah.
or actors or whatever, because it just seemed logical, like that was the next step. We're
Yeah.
all moving towards reality. We find out later that it's just too much work. It's,
Is that what it was?
yeah,
It was
you'd
just-
have to, especially now, with, like, imagine having to film all real people for a Grand Theft Auto game. And then having to program them in a way where their animations play out like fluidly and everything.
Mm.
It would be just you have to pay all those actors. You'd have to, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it's a whole production or whatever.
But
So
now, have you seen GTA 6?
I know,
Not realistic?
yeah.
So, like,
Oh my
where's
God.
that? Like,
well, that's probably
would
what
it
they're
have
gonna.
been cheaper to film people at that point and
No.
apply new technology?
Because the way the game is and the way that it controls and the fluidity, you would have
Yeah.
problems translating FMV to that.
No, you're right.
They are kind of using real people now, though. They're putting the little balls
Yeah.
on their faces.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're still
They
yeah,
use them as
but it's just like in a
models.
much different way.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, it's like there's a difference between like motion capture and FMV.
Yeah.
Like you would not be able to translate FMV to that kind of a game.
But think about all the
Like, it would
nuances
be-
and all their
So-
movement and all the data
so
that it
it-
takes
yeah.
in order to just do 1 3-second
Yeah,
Well,
bit
and
of
like
a scene.
like
Yeah.
not only
It's
that,
the
but
engines
like,
they create to
like,
it.
yeah.
It makes it.
when you
it's
think about
crazy.
like the voice acting in a video game and how many hours
Yeah, that's
hours
obviously
it
costing
is
a lot.
just for somebody, like, not even like saying their lines, but it's just like they'll be recording grunts and groans all day.
Yeah, yeah.
Because it's just like, all right, give me a small one.
Or to really build
Give me a medium one.
And
Give
to
me a
really-
long one.
and to really build the world up too. You have to have all the sprites doing that too. You're walking
Yeah.
past
Yeah, it would be-
a group of
be-
sprites in a town,
yeah,
and
you
you
would
hear
be-
them having a conversation type of thing.
You
That's
would be
going to get
doing
more
that-
advanced, I
you,
think.
You would be doing like every little motion, every angle
Yeah.
of somebody
Okay,
to
I see what you're
like
saying.
translate that. So that would be
It's way easier to plug
would
it
be
in.
an incredible amount of work just to put one person into a video game like that.
Right.
Well, to show how much too, if you remember Doom 3, the sprites that they used for the random people you'd run into that were living people that you can communicate with, they only had like 5 sprites.
Right.
So you would end up seeing the same guy like
Yes.
over and over again, but they would be different characters. But that was just how limited they were with the technology at that time. Now people, they want every sprite to look differently.
Yeah.
So like there's a shitload amount of work that they're doing, like with, especially with the sandbox type
Yeah.
of games.
Right.
I just want to go play Killing Time again.
I've never played it yet, so actually I need Adderall so I can.
What do you mean you never played it yet? Killing Time?
Oh no! Oh, Killing Time. Oh, I thought you meant Under a Killing Moon.
No. Killing Time.
Yeah, Killing Time was great.
I mean, I do want to play Under a Killing Moon again.
Yeah. Well, Killing Time though goes back.
I should probably finish playing Tesla Effect though.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to start that one over from the beginning because like I think what annoyed me was like if I'm gearing up to play like an old school game like that, like I'm not expecting like things where like decisions matter that'll like change the the story in certain ways. So then it's like, okay, well then like now I feel compelled to like look it up and see like, oh well, like what does this do and like how is this going to change the main character or whatever, and then like I think like I ended up like fucking him over at some point by accident by choosing the wrong option and didn't notice it until later, and then I got frustrated and put it down.
Well, see, it's funny. I didn't even think about Killing Time, but that's interesting to bring up because Killing Time was a first-person shooter to use digitized sprites and FMV, but in a Doom-like game. And the other thing they did too, it was an entire world. You were on an island. There was no levels.
So I think there was like certain
versions
of the game that was FMV. Like all the sprites were FMV, and certain versions that were all digitized sprites.
Well, the PC version had the FMV where you'd run into these little spirits, and they would play out an FMV scene of ghosts.
Yes.
So you can learn about what happened on the island. Blah blah blah.
Oh yeah.
But the PC game took out all the digitized sprite enemies. Okay. Which the best part about Killing Time was the digitized sprite enemies, because instead of having a typical Doom enemy that just only turns 4 degrees, it would be a real person like doing a whole motion, looking like a digitized real person that you would shoot.
And now that they recently remastered it, we now have the best version of the game, which has both kinds of sprites.
Yeah, well, but it's the best version of both games put into one.
Yes.
So it has the island set up the way the PC game was, which was much more advanced than the 3DO version. But they brought back both enemy types, all of them, the digitized sprites and the regular enemy types or whatever that weren't. Yeah. And the FMV. And the FMV is also cleaned up better. If you play the original PC version, the FMV scenes that played out were so pixely, it was hard to see. It was worse than the 3DO. Now it's cleaned up, so it's like you're looking at like the actual actors like on a TV screen.
Right.
We should all go back and play Seventh Guest and look at
I do.
That one
pixely
too.
and bizarre those FMV scenes are.
What do they call that though? The not just the FMV scenes, but it was the mansion you moved around. What were they used the same thing in Myst, right? It was a rendered 3D rendered environment.
Yeah. But I mean, like the compression was so bad.
That
even at the time, they had to try to figure out ways to cover it up.
Well, that was one of the games too that had 7 CDs, I think.
It did.
Yeah.
Have you ever played?
It was like the first. It was like the first FMV game.
Phantasmagoria did the same thing too. Harvester had.
Yeah, but it didn't have as many CDs.
Harvester had 3 CDs.
I think Phantasmagoria.
Yeah, you would get to a certain point, and then you would have to pull the CD out and put. You would have like a
lot of games were like that with multiple CDs.
Yeah. Oh yeah, back in my.
That's why the HD games coming out was so big, and then Bluetooth won that war.
Bluetooth?
Bluetooth Blu-ray. I'm sorry.
Well, yeah. Now you're talking about Blu-ray versus HD DVD.
Yeah. Yes.
But like, just like transitioning from CDs to DVDs
was a huge
huge leap.
technology jump. Yeah.
So instead of having 7 CDs, you had like maybe 2
DVDs.
And then the most amazing thing is just knowing how many CDs it took for some of these games. Mm-hmm. I think Phantasmagoria was 7. It was considered one of the biggest games at the time.
It was a huge game.
Yeah.
But then to realize that you can literally fit it on your fucking phone now.
I know, it weirds me out when I think about how
even like
all data compression and just everything.
Even
a terabyte. I bought my stepson a 2 terabyte hard drive, and it was like $100. That used to take up a whole room, and he just carries it around in his pocket.
My 1 terabyte hard drive is like it's the size of my phone. Like it's like a brick. Like because it's old, but now you can get it like a tiny little.
Yeah, like his is only.
I bought a terabyte.
Sean, your sister's talking.
Shut up. What's your topic?
So my topic is almost, I guess, could be like a PSA in a way. You know how there's continent Africa.
Okay.
As opposed to incontinent Africa.
Yeah. What do you? How many deadly spiders do you think live in Africa?
We're talking about species, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
all
that's just not
species.
300, but like 300 species, yeah.
Enough.
0.
They're all in Australia.
Okay, so I was right.
There are the 2 most dangerous spiders in the world is the Brazilian wandering spider and the Sydney funnel web spider.
Okay.
And so the
And
Brazilian
they're from
New Mexico. And but the Brazilian wandering spider is more known for one of the side effects that you can get from it is if it bites you, it can cause you to get like a raging hard-on and you have to go get the blood drained out of it or else your penis will rot off.
Oh, priapism.
Wait, what happens to women?
I don't know.
We get a raging
Yeah, I guess so.
clit on.
Clit on.
And I guess the
Apply
more-
Like a
directly to-
smaller point to
Clit
get
on.
stabbed.
Apply directly
Like,
to the forehead.
oh my god, there's so many more nerves concentrated in that spot.
But there have been like a lot of myths and stuff about it. The Brazilian wandering spider is super aggressive. It'll chase after you. And the biggest threat is that I guess the most scary thing would be if you got bit by this spider in the area it usually dwells in. You're in the middle of nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, where do you go to seek like help? And the Sydney funnel web spider, they have like an anti-venom for it.
Right.
At the end of the day, and people don't realize this because there's been so much old wives' tales and bad information out there, especially like clickbait going, you won't believe, top 10 deadliest spiders,
Right.
all that shit. Less than 3% of people even needed to seek medical attention for both bites. Like,
How are they the deadliest?
I mean, I guess they could. Like the people who have been reported to have suffered death from them the most, which is super rare anyways, because it's called a funnel web spider because it sits in its funnel under a
Right.
rock. So you shouldn't really be running into the thing that much to begin with.
This is how I'm going to kill myself. I'm going to start throwing rocks.
Maybe when it comes to mating season and the males actually go out looking for a female, you could come across one. And the wandering spider, of course, it wanders, but how often are you in the Brazilian rainforest to begin with? Children would be the ones who are most at risk.
Okay.
But even men in their 70s have been able to now you still would want to go
Yeah,
to
their wives.
I'm just imagining a man in his 70s being like, God damn, I gotta find me one of them boner spiders.
They are studying those spiders for that reason.
Oh,
which
God.
is also funny because it's one side you go, we got to take away women's reproductive rights, but we're also going to take this spider's venom and use it to get our dicks hard. It's kind of like a schizophrenic situation going on there. But then we move on to red widows, black widows, brown recluses, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people confuse the hobo spider with the brown recluse, but the hobo spider you don't have to worry about at all.
Mm-hmm.
Brown recluses, again, stay reclusive. The reason they might end up in your house and they most likely would hide. In fact, people have said you can probably sleep in your bed with a brown recluse under your bed and never know it's there.
Right.
And they most likely would hide with something that resembles bark or rotting wood or something like that. So maybe like cardboard boxes
So
and
they
stuff.
probably love this fucking house.
Yeah, but again, unless you start rummaging your hand into a box without looking, like
Well, like when I'm because like I have like like shoes that I haven't worn in a long time, like that's what I'm afraid of.
God.
It's just like sticking my foot into a shoe.
Oh, yeah, they
Like
went-
when
they
I
went-
did that here,
they-
I
they
stuck
went-
my foot into a boot and there was a house centipede.
Oh God.
yeah.
That was traumatizing.
But I mean, a brown recluse wouldn't even hide in a shoe. That would be
Right.
an unlikely place for it to hide. Same
Well,
thing.
there's-
Black
but
widows.
there's, like, always
I've never
stories-
seen one in my life. You
There's
probably
always
never
stories
will.
of like somebody
Yeah.
like leaving their boots in the garage, and then like a brown recluse is in there, and then they get like bitten by it, and then they're fucking looks like the fucking flesh-eating bacteria on their fucking foot.
So there's another misunderstanding.
I had never heard they be gangrenous. I just thought they could paralyze you.
It's because they have a enzyme that,
Mm-hmm.
and so it can cause tissue damage in the spot that it bit in. Then people were showing these pictures and saying, "Oh, it's turning your skin necrotic. It's just
Mm.
eating a hole into your skin." Those are staph infections that may have been caused by a brown recluse, but
Okay,
a staph
that makes more
infection,
sense, yeah.
the staph infection can be caused by anything.
Yes.
So, and as far as how often necrosis or a necrotic bite occurs is super rare. And
Yeah.
they're not even totally sure that the brown recluse is even related to the necrotic tissue type thing.
Yeah, like I said, I never heard about it. Like
It's-
that
it's-
aspect. I only heard that they
Yeah.
can
This has
paralyze
been-
you and
this has
sometimes
been Louis.
cause death.
No,
But-
nobody's died from a brown recluse ever.
Oh, well, there you
Yeah.
go.
Or at least none have ever been reported. And plenty of people have been bitten.
Right.
And then, when you deal with like the black, I've always heard things like children and old people have to look out for a black widow. The bite sucks a couple of days to a week. The reason the bite sucks is because of like your muscles will get spasms and cramps. You'll have fatigue. Not many people even get bit by a Sydney funnel web spider, though they're obviously prepared for it because they collect from their fangs and they have an anti-venom just in case, because it is what they would call nobody uses the term deadly spider bite. They say medically significant spider bite.
Okay.
Because our medical technology is at that place now.
It's like the most boring way
Which is kind of a relief to hear, to be honest.
Yeah. But it's just funny to find out that everything people have been hearing people have been scared shitless of brown recluses in their houses. Yeah. And it's going to bite me and my leg's going to fall off. And it just turns out that you're fine. Everything will be fine. You get bit by a black widow, you'll be.
See, I was living in fear of black widows to kill me.
Yeah, well, they would be tucked away in a damp place, sitting in their own web. You would never really see it. It'd be one of those things where you're cleaning the back of your toilet and you actually run your hand into its nest or something. So if you're that scared, you can always just avoid that by just simply looking. The deadliest, you can't even use that term, but the most dangerous or most venomous spider bites or whatever, you're going to be fine. It's never going to happen to you to begin with, unless you lived in Australia. Your likelihood increases, obviously, which can easily be avoided by just simply wearing gloves when you're digging out your drains. Like I said, it's something. It's in the high percentile. 97% can let their own bodies deal with the venom on its own without even seeking a doctor, and you'll be fine.
Right.
Like only really 3% of cases in almost all of these spider bites. It's a good idea to have sought medical. I mean, it's a good idea to seek medical attention. Yeah. In general, just to be safe, but spider theory, I dabble in spider theory, and but this falls into media literacy. It's just amazing how underwhelming the threat was once I learned all this stuff. I mean, I've been afraid too, especially the brown recluse. I thought like, what if I got bit? I would have to walk around my whole life with a hole in my arm. Right. You know how many brown spiders there are? The wolf spiders, the grass spiders, the funnel web spiders that we have here. People are probably confusing everything for a brown recluse.
Probably.
You would have to get pretty close to figure out it's a brown recluse. They have like a collection of 6 eyes right up in the front. They don't have them like kind of wrapped around their head like most other brown wolf spiders and shit, and they're way smaller than your average like wolf spider or funnel web spider.
Don't they blow up at the back a little bit, and
they're violin shaped. They're very scrawny, actually. Yeah. And now the cellar spider, the spindly ones, like they were all in your cupboard over there. Yeah. They got tiny little bottle.
Yeah. Big orb.
Yeah. And they not the orbs like the ones that would hang out by the light. The ones you would find like in your basement or in a cupboard. They look so wispy and spindly. Like their butts are probably only that big.
Oh, okay.
And they got a tiny little head to it, and they kind of have daddy long legs type of legs. And those were cave spiders. And you're not going to see them walking around. They want to be in darkness. Right. They can barely see. The funny thing is that through evolution, they've developed a venom that is not harmful to us at all, but will murder a black widow and a brown recluse. They eat them.
That's a good way to survive.
Yeah, but
I don't want these humans killing me.
Yeah, so it's actually good to have cellar spiders because they will actually kill the other wandering spiders.
I think that in Australia, there's spiders they keep in their home too to kill the other spiders.
Well, in Australia, everything will murder you.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, in Australia, it would still...
They have mammals that are poisonous.
Yeah. But I mean, Australia, though, the huntsman spider, which is huge, that will get in your house, and it runs really fast. For the most part, I mean, most spiders aren't going to just attack you and bite you. They don't even know what you are. They think you're just another surface. So you really have to get in their shit. Their bites will hurt because they got big fucking fangs that are going to pierce your skin and clench down. But the huntsman spider's not venomous to us at all.
Right.
But I don't want to get bit by one because their fucking fangs are like a quarter inch.
I think those are the ones, though, that they'll like leave them alone if they're in their house. As long as it's not going crazy with the mount, but... Yeah, because they eat all the smaller ones and all the other...
Spider theory.
We can always go back to spider theory. There's probably a lot.
Well, all those megalomorphs, they call them, whatever, the tarantula-type spiders... Again, how dangerous are they to people? They're all very slow. They're clumsy. They can usually only strike down. So you'd have to be, they're meant for a cricket right in front of it. So you'd have to be shoving your finger in front of it. They wouldn't even, if it was crawling on your arm, because it's a flat surface, they're going to have trouble even striking down on your arm. You would have to put something in their face. They kind of like lift up and do that. And the most irritant, like the type of thing they would do is when they rub their body hair and they create like a little flurry of hairs that will like get in your skin and create like a lot of itchiness and stuff for a day, or you know, or it's meant to get into other predators' eyes and stuff that might fuck with it. But you can tell by their body language, like when they walk and they're feeling around, they're comfortable, they're like curious, and they're just doing their thing. It's when they start fucking backing up and lifting their legs up. That's, you know. But and again, you know, it's a slow, clumsy spider that most of the time, I always wondered, how do these people in like Malaysia and stuff, but especially like the rice farmers and shit, they're walking around barefoot, and there's tarantulas out there. How is a tarantula going to get on top of your, you know what I mean? It's one of those things where it's like, you know, it's I always wondered how those people could live with those types of creatures running around, and it turns out because physically they can't even fuck with you majority of the time. It takes a special occasion to get bit by one of them. I think they eat them in Malaysia. They find these ones in the ground like that they collect, because it's basically a crab. And you remove that soft butt where all their guts are, and you got basically a crab with crab legs. Like,
no kidding. Oh my god.
Soft butt guts.
I don't think I could do it.
I'm kind of interested. I mean, I heard they taste good. Once you cook them, like over a fire or whatever, it burns all the hairs off their arms and stuff. It's the same. You crack them open and like suck out the little meat.
I can't even do crawfish though.
I can't either.
Well, that's it for today. So like, comment, subscribe, whatever. Get in the comments, or else the spiders will. Well, they probably won't do anything to you.
Right. It turns out.
See you next week. I don't know, how often are we posting these?
Sure, every week.
Monthly. Eventually. Do them all. Well, that's how you do it. Okay.
Oh. That was so good.
Good night, everybody.
You know what I noticed is the second one. I felt my mind drifting, and I had that coffee, and it kind of came back.